Nature as a feedback. The objective of this episode is simply to be quiet. It's to notice where I am right now in the journey, to check my orientation, so to speak, without correcting it, and to listen for what is already responding to me. Not to change course just yet, not to improve anything, just to recognize that something has been answering back long before I learned to listen. Now, up to this point, the movement has been inward, but not dramatically. So nothing mystical has been introduced here. Nothing symbolic has been demanded. The attention has simply slowed. The pace is softened just enough that certain patterns have become visible. I'm no longer standing at the beginning, but I am not yet standing apart either. So I'm still inside my life, still moving through it, but now with a faint sense that it has been speaking all along. At first, this idea sounds sentimental. It sounds like something added on, something poetic. But the longer I sit with it, the more ordinary it becomes, because feedback is not an abstract concept. It's not a belief, it's just a function. Every system that exists responds to what is placed into it. A body responds to food and rest. A field responds to seed and weather. A relationship responds to tone, timing, and presence. None of this requires philosophy. It requires attention. What changes is not the existence of feedback itself, but whether it is recognized as such. Now, for a long time, I mistook feedback for coincidence. Something just happened coincidentally. Or worse, for punishment or reward or curse. Something happened. I reacted emotionally, assuming meaning without observation. I judged outcomes quickly. If something went well, I claimed credit, or, I was blessed, or I was smarter than that. I did it. If something went poorly, I blamed the circumstances or other people. In neither case did I pause long enough to just kind of ask what the event itself was telling me. Now, there is a subtle shift that occurs when that question becomes natural. Not forced, not anxious, just plain natural. Now, what is this responding to, do you think? Not who is at fault, not how do I fix this immediately, but what is being mirrored back to me right now? The idea of life as feedback is not a comforting at first. It removes the luxury of the drama. Drama allows for endless explanation without resolution. Feedback requires correlation. It quietly asks whether there is alignment between the intention, action, and the result. Now, that question can feel very exposing. It offers no moral judgment, but it does remove excuses. I notice this most clearly in the smallest of moments. A morning that feels rushed did not begin the way by accident. A conversation that turned sharp, it did not arrive fully formed. A body that feels heavy is not conspiring against me. These are responses. They're not accusations. They are signals. Earlier in the journey, I was much more interested in the meaning than the signal. I wanted interpretation before observation. I wanted stories. Now I'm looking around and I'm learning to pause a bit. Pause at the signal itself. To let it stand without explanation. To see it as data rather than a narrative. This is not cold or mechanical. In fact, it is the opposite. It is intimate. It's feedback only exists in a relationship. A plain rock does not receive feedback from a cliff, but a living system does. And a conscious life, whether it acknowledges it or not, is in constant exchange with its surroundings. I begin to see that many of the things I once called problems were actually delayed messages. Now, They were not sudden, they were cumulative. They arrived only after I had ignored quieter signals for a long time. Now, fatigue, resentment, restlessness, boredom, anxiety, these did not appear overnight. They built gradually, asking for attention long before they demanded it. When attention is withheld, feedback escalates, not out of malice, but out of necessity. A system, you see, it seems to me that it must respond in proportion to what is ignored. This is true in the body, in work, in relationships, and in thought. What is subtle becomes louder only because it has not been heard yet. And I think about how often I attempted to correct outcomes instead of inputs. I changed the environment without changing habits. I sought new opportunities without altering patterns of effort. I asked for clarity without slowing my pace enough to perceive it. And then I was surprised when the same results followed me. Feedback does not argue, it just repeats. It is patient, it does not care how clever my explanations are. It responds only to what is consistently placed into motion. This realization does not arrive with shame, at least not if I allow it to settle properly. Now, it arrives with me in a strange relief, because if life is responding, then it is also listening. And if it's listening, then attention matters more than force. Force attempts to override feedback. Attention learns from it. I notice that when I stop narrating my experience internally, feedback becomes more clear. The moment I begin explaining why something happened, I'm already stepping away from seeing how it actually happened. Explanation can be useful later, but observation must come first. There is a discipline here that needs to be applied. But it's not rigid. It is simple. It's simply the discipline of not interrupting what is being shown, to let an outcome set long enough to reveal its origin, to resist the urge to immediately label it good or bad, positive or negative. I realize how often I treated life like a courtroom instead of a mirror. I gathered evidence to defend myself constantly rather than information to understand myself. Feedback requires honesty, not defense, and honesty does not mean self-blame. It means accuracy. It means seeing cause and effect without attaching identity to either. If I plant something and it grows poorly, that does not mean I'm flawed. It means the conditions were not aligned properly with the seed. This way of seeing begins to soften my relationship with effort. I'm less frantic. I do not push as hard against the resistance. Instead, I ask where resistance is pointing. Resistance, too, is also feedback when considered properly. Not always a signal to stop, but often a signal to adjust things. I think of how many times I confused persistence with wisdom. I kept moving in the same direction simply because I had already invested energy there. Feedback was present, but I interpreted it as a challenge to overcome rather than the information to integrate. Now, there is a humility required here, a humbleness, but it is not the humility of self diminishment. It is the humility of participation. I'm not outside the system directing it, I'm inside it contributing to it. This is where something important makes that shift. Feedback is not personal, but it is very intimate. It is not about me, but it involves me completely. Every choice I make becomes part of a conversation I'm having. I cannot just opt out of it. That realization makes attention feel sacred without making it dramatic. It simply means that what I notice shapes what notices me right back. I began to understand that clarity does not arrive as a sudden insight, it accumulates through repeated noticing. Patterns emerge slowly, they are visible only when I stop demanding immediate answers. There are seasons where feedback is subtle and seasons where it is unmistakable. But in both cases, it is consistent. What changes is my capacity to see it or observe it. And at this point in the journey, I'm no longer asking whether feedback exists. I'm asking whether I'm willing to accept what it reveals. That is a different question entirely. And I guess that's just a part of the evolving that I'm seeing. Now, acceptance does not mean passivity. It means alignment. It means allowing the information to inform the next movement rather than insisting on the old one itself. I notice that when I align even slightly, things feel quieter. Not easier necessarily, but clearer. There is less internal friction altogether, less arguing with what is already happening around me. This kind of clarity does not remove the responsibility at all. It deepens it because once feedback is seen, it cannot be unseen. I can no longer pretend ignorance. I can no longer claim surprise at outcomes that have already shown themselves repeatedly. But again, this is not heavy, it is steady. Responsibility here is not punishment, it is participation coupled with awareness. I'm beginning to trust that life is not random, but it is also not scripted. It responds dynamically. It adjusts in real time. This episode is not about mastery, it's about recognition. Recognition that life has been in conversation with me long before I learned the language. And perhaps the language is simpler than I thought it was. Cause, effect, attention, response. Nothing mystical needs to be added here. Nothing philosophical needs to be removed. This is simply the terrain becoming visible as I walk in it. I'm not stepping away yet, but I'm still within the movement. But I am now aware that every step leaves an imprint, and every imprint invites a reply. That awareness changes how I walk, how I'm less hurried, less distracted, more precise without being so rigid. I do not need certainty to proceed. I need attentiveness. And so as I continue, I carry this understanding quietly. Life is not waiting just to judge me. It is responding to me consistently, faithfully, without commentary. The question is no longer whether I will receive feedback. The question is whether I will listen before it needs to raise its voice again. Now, that is where I'm kind of at now, and I know that many of you can relate to that too. Now, of course, I'm not finished, not resolved, but oriented differently than before, and that's enough to kind of keep me walking on. I appreciate you tuning in. End of vlog.